I had a kind of a strange childhood. Lost my mother when I was 7 and was sent to a number of different boarding schools and orphanages, and I sort of got lost really in American film and literature. So I grew up watching films, Hitchcock and James Stewart and Edward G. Robinson and Bacall and Bogart and Veronica Lake. Those were the films that I watched as a child, you know, predominantly black and white films from the 40s and 50s. And it was the writing, it was the script. So when I started writing in my early 20s, it wasn't really a conscious decision to write an American novel. It was a conscious decision to write about the things that fascinated me, which was the Ku Klux Klan and the Vietnam War and Watergate and Nixon and the assassination of the Kennedys and Marilyn Monroe and Vegas and the CIA and the FBI and serial killers. You have Vendetta, which is the mafia. You have Les Anonymes, which is CIA. In fact, when I wrote Vendetta, which was the third one that was published in England, when I finished it, having done so much research on organised crime in America, I realised actually that they were pretty much the most disorganised criminals that you could ever hope to meet. So I felt at some point I had to write a book about really, really organised criminals, hence I wrote a book about the CIA, who are probably the most organised criminals in the world. And then you have this one, which was the New York Police Department, corruption in the New York Police Department. And it's a sort of a story that is told in two different threads. There's a contemporary story and there's a historical story to go with it. Which tells of the efforts to get rid of the mafia out of New York in the 1980s under Rudy Giuliani. They weren't necessarily formally intended to be a trilogy, and they were written at different times, but because of the way that they've been published in France, they do sort of fit together. So when we released the new book in October, we're sort of going back to a more human story, I suppose, similar to Sur le Silence. But yes, Vendetta, Les Anonymes and Les Anges de New York are a trilogy of stories that really deal with iconic aspects of crime and justice within American history, contemporary American history, very definitely. The thing I explain in England when people say, why do you love France so much and why do you enjoy going to France so much, why do you always go to France, is because the French culturally seem to have this endless inquisitiveness. They ask why, and they ask what for, and they ask how come all the time. And I think because the books I write aren't conventional police procedurals, and because they're not really thrillers in a conventional sense, they deal with the psychology of crime, the psychology of the human condition. I think there's a fascination for that in France, which is unique to the French culture. And the devotion and the loyalty and the camaraderie that I feel from readers here and other authors in France is unique. There's nowhere else like it in the world, and it's something I hold very dearly and something I consider a profoundly important aspect not only of my professional career but also my personal life. And whenever I'm asked to come, I say yes, I drop everything and I come.